We spoke with Utah Senator Mike Lee earlier about his vision for a simpler, happier tax season. Senator Mike Lee, welcome to the Independence for the first time.
Thank you.
It is tax season. People they're a little sad, they're a little seeing their money go to some bad projects, bad plans, entitlements, and they want change, they want reform. This show is all about plans for tackling the future. What is your plan for fixing bad tax code?
You know, I've got a tax reform proposal that I call the Family Fairness Opportunity Tax Reform Act, or FFOTRA. It doesn't make for a great acronym, but it is great policy. Here's what it does. It gets rid of the marriage tax penalty and also the parent tax penalty. It takes our current system, which is really complex and hard to follow, converts it into a two-rate system. Most Americans would file under one rate of 15%. Anyone making up to $87,850 if filing singly, or twice that amount if filing as a married person filing jointly, would pay under that 15% rate. And people making above those amounts would pay at a rate of 35%. At both rates, people would be eligible for two deductions, one for charitable contributions and the other one for mortgage interest. But the most distinguishing and important feature about this plan is that it would create a new additional $2,500 per child tax credit. This is there to help offset the parent tax penalty, reflecting the fact that today's working parents are taxed twice relative to our senior entitlement programs. Once when they actually make their income and pay their taxes, and again as they incur the substantial costs associated with raising children.
And do parents, do they pay the brunt of the tax whipping post?
Yes, parents do, relative to our senior entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare. Because we have to remember that these programs are funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. In other words, it's today's workers who are paying the benefits for today's retirees. But it's today's children who will be paying the retirement benefits of today's workers. And so parents really are a necessary part of this process, and parents need to be recognized for the substantial contribution that they make to our senior entitlement programs.
Senator,
our existing tax structure doesn't acknowledge that.
Senator, one of the interesting things about your tax plan is that it eliminates state and local tax deductions, which makes people who live in New York and California a little bit sadder than those who live in Utah. Can you talk us through why we should be paying more taxes here in blue states?
Yeah, so the point is not to raise anyone's taxes so much as it is to say the federal government shouldn't be subsidizing and rewarding those states that choose to have really high income tax rates. Those states can choose to do that if they want to, but taxpayers in other states shouldn't be forced to pay higher rates as a result of the fact that some states charge higher taxes.
Now, Senator, there are some things that you are holding on to, as you mentioned. We're still holding on to the mortgage interest deduction. You're capping that at about $300,000, but that is a tax that has come under some criticism from a few folks who would say that that is somewhat regressive. There are plenty of people who do not own homes and can't take that tax deduction. Why not a simpler tax plan that doesn't even include that sort of incentive baked into the tax code?
Well, we think this is an important compromise. We think this allows our economy to benefit from the value of this kind of tax deduction, but it caps it out so that, most people are still able to reap its benefits, but it's capped out. Millionaires don't necessarily need this. If you're buying a house that's significantly more expensive than that, then you don't necessarily need to rely on this tax deduction provided by the federal government.
You've talked a lot about free market populism as a winnable electoral idea, and some of the ideas behind this tax plan are directly sort of trying to attract the middle class. Do you think the Republican Party has forgotten how to talk to the middle class in terms of economic policy?
I don't think the Republican Party has forgotten how to talk to the middle class, but I do think we can do much better. I think to some extent, as Republicans, we've been a little bit too willing sometimes to wear the caricatured label painted of us by the left, the label that says somehow we're the party of the top 1%, the party of the country club. That isn't true. The fact is that we are conservative not in spite of our compassion. We are conservative because we are compassionate. True conservative principles, properly implemented in good policies, will bring about real benefits for the poor and the middle class in America, and that's why we're conservative.
All right. Well, one of the accolades that Senator Rand Paul has gotten is for the flat tax in his budget. What's wrong with the flat tax, and how is yours any different, your rejiggering of the tax brackets different from Rand Paul's flat tax?
You know, the advantage to this system, the one that I have proposed, is that it puts us in a position where we don't have to raise the taxes of anyone who can be described as a middle-class taxpayer or a poor taxpayer. If you go to a single rate system, it's a little bit harder to do that. Another way of describing it is that, you know, in making any kind of a transition to a more simple tax code, you're going to have some real shock in the system if you go straight from a 5, 6, or 7 rate system to a single rate system. You can cushion a lot more of that blow, of that shock, if you convert it instead into a 2 rate system, and that's what we've done here.
All right, is there any way of making taxes a sexy enough issue that it could be the centerpiece of a presidential election?
Well, you know, tax reform is a big issue to a lot of Americans. I think it'll be one of many things that Americans will be focused on this election year, this midterm election year, but also in 2016. I certainly think that's a possibility in any election year. It's probably not enough in and of itself. But I do think that this kind of middle-class, pro-growth, anti-poverty tax reform plan is one that really will play well throughout America, and it'll inure to the benefit of Republicans if Republicans will